Ladies, gentlemen, and brethren, good evening. Now, as I'm sure you know, we Freemasons have a reputation for being a bit odd. You've probably heard rumours about us rolling up our trouser legs, giving strange handshakes, and meeting in a blacked-out room, guarded with a man with a drawn sword. And guess what? It's true. But we do these things just not because we're eccentric free spirits, but because at one time this was normal behaviour for people who wanted to learn how to improve themselves. It's a 500-year-old system of self-improvement, and it works wonderfully well. It isn't broken, so we don't try to fix it. Freemasonry is the oldest non-religious self-help organisation in the Western world. It began in the 1450s when 3 stonemasons who had worked for an architect who had written books on how to use symbols and myths to change the way people think, were sacked when his plot to usurp the crown of Scotland failed. Luckily, they found new jobs working for Aberdeen Borough Council extending St Nicholas's Kirk. At that time there was no universal education, few people could read and write, and geometry was a trade secret of successful builders. 2 important symbols of how to build imposing public structures were the square, to make sure the walls were vertical, and the compasses, for measuring the size of shaped stones to be sure they fitted into the wall. We still use these 2 implements as a badge of our interests. These 3 stonemasons decided that they wanted to learn more about the power of symbols and how they can help us understand the world about us. They formed a lodge to study how they could improve the quality of their work and how they could pass on their skills and knowledge to the next generation. They came up with what they called a peculiar or singular system, which used myths about the building of King Solomon's temple as a form of action learning and taught the use of symbols to pass on difficult ideas. They accidentally established a scheme which developed self-confidence, conferred the ability to memorise information, the faculty to analyse situations, and the capacity to explain solutions. They soon opened up their society to any men of good report who wanted to improve themselves. This system has remained unparalleled until the more recent introduction of public schools, such as Eton and Harrow. And it's one of the reasons why so many Freemasons have been movers and shakers in society over the years. If you study a list of famous Freemasons, you'll find a higher than expected proportion of innovative individuals. Freemasonry has helped its members to learn about themselves, to improve their moral fibre, and to develop strong attitudes to civic responsibility and charitable work. They've been jazz musicians, astronauts, soldiers, cowboys, scientists, airmen, filmmakers, actors, industrialists, prime ministers, archbishops of Canterbury, US presidents, kings, and magicians among our members. These 3 out-of-work stonecutters came up with 3 great ideas about improving themselves and the quality of their work. They studied how to live and work together in harmony and goodwill as if they were loving brothers from the same family, and they call this brotherly love. They worked out how to help relieve the needs of the poor, the sick, the orphaned, and the widows, to alleviate suffering in society, and they call this relief. And finally, they studied how symbols could convey complex ideas which were difficult to put into words. And as they couldn't read or write, they also developed what they call the art of memory. They call this truth. These 3 men were brothers Alexander Stewart, David Menzies, and Matthew Wright, and they were each in turn worshipful masters of the first lodge of symbolic Freemasons, which was set up in Aberdeen around 1480, and has continued through to modern times. The ideas they started have evolved and developed into the Freemasonry of today. Freemasonry still practices this old established system, which at first sight may seem crusty and fossilised, but it uses techniques such as role-playing, memory work, public speaking, action and double-loop learning, which are at the forefront of the teaching methods used in modern universities. Its techniques have evolved over many centuries and even more generations of brethren, and it enables them to pass on its traditions to benefit its members by making them better people, at peace with themselves and the society they live in. Joining the lodge offers access to an environment which enables you to learn about yourself, your fellow lodge members and society as a whole. We come together in open lodge to study brotherly love, relief and truth. But let me assure you that Freemasonry is not a religion. It's a philosophical system. It asks only one important question of anyone who wants to join. Do you believe there is some sort of supreme order and purpose to the universe? It doesn't ask the nature of your belief. That's a private matter for you alone. But if you don't think there is any purpose to the cosmos, then there's no point in your joining Freemasonry, because its main objective is to enable you to meet like-minded individuals to share your ideas about the purpose and nature of life. All the great religions, as well as quantum physics, which is my profession, know that the way in which a conscious individual behaves leads to his discovering the purpose of his life, and his attitudes create his environment. Freemasonry brings together men and women of goodwill and encourages them to share their personal insights in a non-sectarian way. It totally forbids the discussion of religion and politics within the lodge. All references to the source of order in the cosmos are discussed in neutral terms related to a mythical purpose of building a temple of humanity. We speak of the great architect of the universe to allow us to imagine this force for order. You will have your own name for this force. It may be Jehovah, it may be Jesus Christ, it may be Allah, it may be the laws of physics. Freemasonry doesn't ask you what name you use. Instead, it helps you share your insights with others using neutral terms such as the great architect. We do not explore how belief systems differ. Instead, we concentrate on sharing the concepts we agree on. Freemasonry evolved a way of passing on its knowledge using a series of ritual dramas which portray a great myth about building a perfect temple. If you were to join us, you'd play a role in reenacting this wonderful timeless story, and you learn by doing. And I will follow this video with a brief description of that story. Freemasonry's study of symbols and truth has led to many benefits for society. I'll give you a few examples. Freemason John Wallis was inspired to discover algebra and the power of the equation after first studying Masonic symbols. He taught Isaac Newton, who used the tools of algebra to discover the calculus, which is the basis of modern physics. Freemason Sir Robert Murray founded the Royal Society, the first scientific society in the world, using principles he learned from Freemasonry, and so created a society which valued and developed experimental science. Freemason George Washington presided over the Freemasons who wrote the American Constitution based on the democratic principles of the Masonic Lodge, and became the first democratically elected ruler of the United States of America. Let me name a few Freemasons you might recognise. Duke Ellington, Nat King Cole, Lionel Hampton, Dizzy Gillespie, Paul Robeson, Edward Appleton, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Buzz Aldrin, John Glenn, Gus Grissom, Sir Robert Murray, Sir Winston Churchill, Elias Ashmold, Enrico Fermi, Edward Jenner, John Wallis, the Duke of Wellington, Douglas MacArthur, John Pershing, Kit Carson, Jim Bowie, Roy Rogers, George Washington, Paul Revere, John Hancock, John Paul Jones, Ben Franklin, James Edwin Webb, Joseph Guillotine, King Camp Gillette, King George V, Henry Ford, Samuel Colt, Charles Lindbergh, Louis Mayer, William Hogarth, Robert Burns, Rudyard Kipling, Walter Scott, Arthur Conan Doyle, Dr. Barnardo, Lord Leverhulme, Billy Butlin, Robert Scott, Ernest Shackleton, Samuel Wesley, John Wayne, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, Rick Wakeman, Harry Houdini, and Sooty. Sooty was initiated into Shevin Lodge in Otley because Brother Harry Corbett, who worked hand in glove with Sooty for many years, was organist of Shevin Lodge, and he used to bring Sooty into the ceremony, and so the brethren decided as a demonstration ceremony they would initiate Sooty. So Sooty went through all the 3 degrees, became a Master Mason, although when he delivered his test questions, he had to whisper them into Brother Harry's ear so that Harry could repeat them out loud. So you can see from this list that Freemasonry has attracted many creative and successful people from all parts of society. There's clearly something about Freemasonry that has inspired so many leaders and shakers to become part of this oddball order. So what is it? I can sum it up in one word: tradition. Tradition is defined in the Oxford Dictionary as the transmission of customs or beliefs from generation to generation, or a long-established custom or belief system which is passed on. As a Freemason, you're offered the chance to learn things which have already benefited older generations and can also benefit you and future generations. Freemasons continue to roll up their trouser legs, exchange strange handshakes, and guard their lodge with a naked sword, because we follow traditions that have been found to work over 500 years. Freemasonry is based on 3 great principles: brotherly love. We offer friendship, support and social events in the fellowship of a well-run lodge and its associated social program. Relief. We offer a chance to do good for the community by contributing either time or money to various charities such as Tender Loving Care, which presents teddy bears to vulnerable children going into hospital, or the RNLI, which provides lifeboats to help save people's life at sea. And we also study truth. A lodge offers you the chance to learn how to recognise your own truth by studying the philosophy of Masonic thinking and taking part in the rituals. When you join us, you are helping preserve the best of our ways, whilst enjoying eccentric, historical, hierarchical absurdities which have such a distinguished history. A new candidate can help Freemasonry to renew itself and pass its secrets about the human condition on, to inspire you and your children for generations to come. So why would you want to become a Freemason? If you're interested in self-development, in making new friends, in taking part in weird and wonderful opportunities to learn, and in helping put something back into society, then think about joining the Freemasons and becoming a Mason. You'll be heir to a wonderful tradition of inspirational self-improvement. Now, I'm now going to show you a further video which will explain something about the great teaching myth of Freemasonry. Freemasons will get more from this than non-Freemasons, but even if you're not a Mason, you will still find it might be interesting. Thank you. Freemasonry has 2 histories. It has a mythical history, which begins in the Masonic Year of Light known as Anni Lucius, and tells how Freemasonry began with Adam, was passed down the lines of the biblical patriarchs to the builders of Solomon's Temple, and continued down to the present day. The rituals of the craft and many side orders are based upon these wonderful myths. Freemasonry also has a mundane history, which is less well known and not as widely taught. It begins with the names, dates and places where the masters of the first Masonic Lodge started to use mythical history as a teaching aid to help them and their members develop an understanding of themselves and the world they live in. Their method of teaching was to tell stories about symbols, people and buildings. The teaching principle these first Freemasons adopted is still spoken of today in the form: tell me I'll forget, show me I'll remember, involve me and I'll understand. Freemasonry involves its members in the stories it tells so they can understand the deep meaning contained in these old myths and begin to appreciate the significance of certain ancient symbols which predate written language. The first Freemasons stumbled upon 2 powerful concepts. The first was that symbols can convey feelings and insights which are beyond the ability of language to capture, but still contain truth. The second was that stories tell far more than a list of facts does, and myths can reveal deeper truths that are not easy to put into words. What is this extra information that a story conveys? Well, when we tell a story about somebody, we relate a series of episodes from their life to show how they developed as a person as they responded to the things that happened to them. What changes a story from a list of events is the connections we instinctively detect between the events. If we believe there is a purpose to life, then we're interested in learning about the connections between actions and their consequences. Freemasonry defines itself as a peculiar system of morality, veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. When it began, a small group of illiterate individuals recognized that there were two types of things in the world. There were objects, things like stones or hammers, which could be explained completely by listing their properties, such as the roughness or smoothness of the stone, the squareness or wonkiness of the building block, or the weight and balance of the hammer. But there were also other things like temples, kings and symbols, which could only be understood by telling their stories. For this second type of thing, a simple description was never enough. You have to hear the story to understand why Solomon wanted to build a temple, why a temple might need 2 pillars at its entrance, and why the centre of a perfect circle is a magical point of balance and harmony. I can name 2 of the individuals responsible for this insight. They were David Menzies and Alexandra Wright, and both were members of a lodge of stonemasons in Aberdeen in 1480. By their study of symbols and stories, they developed an insight into the nature of process which created Freemasonry. They recognised that people, symbols and cultures are not simply things, but ongoing processes that unfold over time. They wouldn't have explained it in that way, but they certainly saw there were only 2 types of things, objects and entities. Objects don't change, but processes and entities do, and processes change objects. By working on a rough stone, you can improve it and make it smoother and squarer. And if you can polish a lot of rough stones, you can create a beautiful building. If you want to change yourself and understand the changing world in which you live, then you must do more than simply learn facts. You must search for a way of changing and improving yourself. The allegory they used to convey this idea was the story of building the most beautiful building in the whole world, King Solomon's Temple. It was created by shaping many individual rough stones into highly polished parts of a graceful and beautiful structure. They realized that by telling the story of how to build a beautiful building, they could also teach their lodge members how to become better members of society, to become living stones in a temple of humanity. Over time, a great teaching myth was developed based on the story of the building and the destruction of King Solomon's Temple and its successors. The main structure of this teaching myth was encapsulated within 5 degrees, which at one time were all worked within the early craft lodges. The rest of the backstory of how Solomon came to be the king who was inspired to build this wonderful temple is told in other side degrees. I've spent many years extracting the logical storyline from the rituals of Freemasonry. There are many common elements across all the degrees and orders, which involve opening and closing the assembly, checking all officers know their duties and responsibilities, and ensuring that only initiated members of the degree are present. What I have concentrated on here are the wonderful stories which are told to candidates as part of their initiation into the main degrees. Sometimes the stories are acted out, with the candidate playing the role of one or other Masonic hero. At other times, the stories are told to the assembled brethren in the form of a carefully memorized traditional history. The ritual is always verbal. It often includes gestures and postures to be performed during the reenactment, and it makes use of tracing boards. By telling and retelling ancient stories, Freemasons preserved and nurtured this teaching myth until the early 1800s. Then, unfortunately, some individuals took it upon themselves to improve and simplify the stories entrusted to their care. The 5 main degrees were split between different and separate orders. Oaths and penalties were removed from the ceremonies, and the names used to describe the Most High were changed to more suitable ones, and many degrees were awarded in name only, without their ceremonies being worked. In this way, an ancient verbal heritage has been fragmented. I will also illustrate this with a series of 6 tracing boards, which are the work of an associate member of the Lodge of Living Stones, Brother Martin Jackson. The intent of Freemasonry's great narrative is to plant in the candidate's mind the idea that the shaping of their character, and indeed their soul, can be likened to the building of a great temple, known in Jewish and Christian scripture as King Solomon's Temple. This building was chosen because the men who began Freemasonry were operative stoneworkers who worked on sacred buildings. To them, the most important, beautiful and perfect building ever constructed was King Solomon's Temple. Boards. The myth tells the story of how the temple went through all the difficulties of construction. It illuminates the tensions between the various workers involved in its creation, and reaches a major reversal just before the building is about to be consecrated to the great architect of the universe. Then the story moves on to the neglect and destruction of the temple, followed by the discovery that even when it appears that the whole work has been destroyed, a great secret about the meaning of life can still be found within the secret depths of the ruins. There are 6 key steps in understanding what is contained within the teaching myth of Freemasonry, and 5 of them are still worked within 3 orders of Freemasonry. The final step depends upon the determination of each individual brother to understand the symbols and myths. The first degree encourages candidates to face up to their fears, to trust their brethren, and offers them the possibility to know themselves better. In the tracing board of the first degree, they are shown the ground floor of the temple that they are to build. That temple represents their own character. You will also see many tools and furniture on the floor of this building site. These are to use in the construction of the ground floor of your personal temple. As symbols work on your emotions, not through logic, you will need to think about the symbolism of the tracing board so that it can begin to work its magic on transforming your character for the better. The purpose of this degree is to encourage the candidate to learn 3 key lessons. These are to face up to their fears, to trust in the brethren of the lodge to guide them, even when they cannot see their way, and finally, that if they persevere in the quest, then the rituals and symbols can guide them to the light of knowledge. The second degree encourages its candidates to develop their intellect by studying the workings of nature. This work teaches them to face up to all aspects of truth, and hints that there is a mysterious sacred symbol hidden in the centre of the temple of their character that they are building. Having developed their emotional understanding whilst building the ground floor, they are now encouraged to build a second level. The purpose of this degree is to encourage candidates to use their reason to investigate the mechanism of logic and reason to help them understand the forces which act on a building and why it should be built square and true if it is to stand fast forever. The Marked Man. This degree introduces the candidate to some of the tensions which are present in the various sections of the workforce, representing the deeper motives and urges of their personality which squabble over the work needed to be done and who will be rewarded for it. It is set in a time when the work on the temple has been almost completed, but for reasons that are not explained, the chief architect has disappeared without apparently completing the final plans for the finished building. A new architect has been appointed by the 2 remaining Grand Masters to complete the work. The candidate plays the role of an enlightened workman, who from careful study of the incomplete plans deduces the shape of the stone which will be needed to complete the structure. This is where he applies the power of his intellect to deducing from the incomplete plans what is needed to finish the building. This ritual serves a number of teaching purposes. It shows that the main shape of the building can be accurately deduced from its part-finished shape, and that to complete the building, the candidate should learn how to think things through for himself, without relying on instructions from superiors, and that sometimes an individual can be correct, when the whole organisation tells him he is wrong. The degree shows the uncompleted arch lacking its keystone, and the Platonic solids which reveal the existence of a divine plan which can be deduced from reason. This degree is now worked under the auspices of a separate marked Grand Lodge in England and Wales. Fellow craft masons are not often told about it until they have taken the third degree. The third degree reminds the candidate that he is mortal, that human life is finite, and that he must use it well. This board helps him understand that even though he is mortal and his body must die, his thoughts, plans and aspirations can live on, and help him understand the real import of the divine spark at his centre. Completing the third degree, the candidate is given another set of test questions and answers to learn. If the third degree is intended to be the end of the story, then why would he need a set of questions to prove his ability in this degree? On previous occasions, he would have been called on to use such questions to gain admittance to a higher degree. But that higher degree is no longer worked in his craft lodge. Instead, he will need to petition a different order to access the final lesson of this great story. The ritual takes the candidate to the ruins of King Solomon's temple, where he is set the task of clearing the rubble, but also told by the presiding three masters of the chapter to watch out for anything unusual. If he is a marked man, he knows that a replacement was appointed and the original secrets were rumoured to have been well hidden. The story ends with the recovery of the lost word, and the complex form of pronouncing it brings together in perfect harmony the three driving forces of Masonic study: wisdom, strength and beauty, by acting together, reveal the true secret of Freemasonry. This is the end of a course of instruction that has unveiled the heart and inner mysteries of Freemasonry by offering a chance to understand the symbol of the centre. The great teaching myth of Freemasonry has helped candidates approach and understand the truth which underpins all the ancient religions. Masonry is universal and has nothing that is exclusive or intolerant. Each degree erects a platform on which all people of belief may stand side by side and hand in hand as brethren. Whatever your religion, your birthplace or your language, you are among brethren. We all learn to speak a common language, the language of Freemasonry, and it speaks directly to our hearts. The ritual myth of Freemasonry leads you through forms and ceremonies. It displays to you certain symbols and emblems. It doesn't explain their interpretation, but only shows you their general tendency. Masonry places a thread in your hands to guide you through a labyrinth of ignorance. You must apply and interpret the symbols and ceremonies of its degrees in such manner as may seem to you true and appropriate. And to help you, you need to seek out the full story, which is fragmented and scattered. The Mason's Creed holds that no person has any right to interfere with the religious belief of another. Each brother is absolutely sovereign in their own belief. This journey towards awareness of the divine spark within that links you to the whole of creation is symbolically summed up in Brother Wilmshurst's tracing board of the centre, which is here depicted by Brother Martin Jackson. I will let the symbolism of the journey speak for itself and not try to reduce it to mere words. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please click the subscribe box in the bottom right hand corner of the screen.